Hi everyone, Cobweb Rose here, and today I wanted to bring you guys some sections of the AT for weekend warriors. So if you've got a 2-day or 3-day weekend coming up, I want to bring you my favorite bite-sized sections of the AT that you can cold turkey, no through hiking legs, go in and hike in 2 to 3 days depending on how ambitious you're feeling. So let's get started. So I decided the best way to kind of break up these different sections was kind of by, I guess, trail superlatives, if you will. So the first section I want to bring you guys, also this is going from south to north because that's the direction I hiked, if that helps you any. But the first section I want to tell you guys about is what I consider the most sentimental section of the trail, and that's Springer Mountain in Georgia at mile marker 0. I'm using the 2024 far out mileage for those of you who are wondering, to Neal's Gap at mile marker 31.3. So this is obviously a 31.3 mile section, easiest math you'll ever have to do. There's a lot of people in this section, but you get all of the through hike excitement vibes through here. If you start between usually March and April, May at the latest, hiking this particular section, you're going to get to meet a lot of that year's class of AT through hiker hopefuls. And people are just super excited. They're very friendly. They're getting to know people. They're getting to know the trail, the culture. And it's just a lot of fun, like the energy in that section. You get to hike over Blood Mountain, which of course has iconic views, the shelter at the top, and a lot of history related to it. And it's a super easy on-off the trail because you can start either at Amicalola Falls State Park and add an extra 9-mile-ish hike up the approach trail to start at Springer Mountain, or you can start at the Springer Mountain trailhead, which is the parking area a mile south of Springer Mountain. Just hike a mile south to the summit of Springer and then turn around and start your hike north. So arguably this is actually a 32.3 mile section to a 40-ish mile section, depending on how you decide to start it. But Neal's Gap is super easy to get off at, either by pickup, shuttle, or potentially long-term parking, but always check the rules on that because I'll be honest with you, I did so much research for this section, but long-term parking was not one of them. So make sure you're doing your research before you park your car long-term somewhere. But that's honestly like the most sentimental section of trail that I can really think of, and perhaps one of the more iconic ones. Now, if you guys are looking for all the views in the South, there are 2 places that I would recommend doing sections. The first one is Winding Steer Gap in North Carolina. It starts at mile marker 109.6, and this section ends at the Netahela Outdoor Center, also called the Knock, at mile marker 136.9. So this is a 27.3 mile section of trail with really no additional on-off hiking. You can start in Franklin, North Carolina, which is a great little trail town. It is a hitch or a drive in and out from Winding Steer Gap, but it's got great hostels, nice outfitter, good food. Or if you want to, you can hike this section southbound instead and end your hike in Franklin, because it's always nice to end in a trail town where you can get nice hot food and showers and such. You get to cover Waya Bald and Wesser Bald in this section, which both have beautiful views and observation towers at the top. And then after you finish Wesser Bald going northbound, you end up hiking down into the Knock through this section of trail that just has beautiful open views and a little bit of a rock scramble. So if you're looking for a quick weekend hike with lots of views, definitely recommend doing this section in North Carolina. Now, the second section I would recommend doing if you're looking for great views with a quick in and out is the Roan Highlands in Tennessee. Now, I'd recommend starting at Indian Grave Gap at mile marker 352.9, just because there is shuttle services that run to that starting point, or there's a small parking area where you can get dropped off or potentially leave a vehicle. And then ending at Highway 19E in Tennessee, which is mile marker 395.6. This is a 42.7 mile section. Like I said, with not a lot of hiking to get on and off, but definitely would require a little coordination with vehicles. You get to go over Beauty Spot in Tennessee, which has absolutely gorgeous views. Highly recommend a sunrise or sunset hike there. You also get to go over Unaka Mountain in Tennessee, which is an absolutely beautiful forested mountain, and it just feels absolutely magical at the summit, even though there aren't any views up there. And then you get to hit Roan Mountain, which is actually home to the highest shelter on the AT. It's just a really beautiful hike over the mountain. You kind of feel like you're in the Northeast at that section. And then you get to go over the Roan Highlands themselves, the Balds, where you get gorgeous 360 views. And I definitely recommend sunrise, sunsetting on top of one of the Balds if you've got the time in your day. Now, ending at Highway 19E sounds a little crazy because you're like, isn't that just a highway crossing and there's no parking there? The answer is yes, but when you go northbound and you end on Highway 19E, if you turn left, you can walk, I think it's like 0.2 or 0.3 to get to Mountain Harbor Hostel, which is one of the kind of historic hostels on the trail. They're also famous for their delicious homemade decadent breakfast. Or if you're more into the party scene, you can take a right on Highway 19E, and I think it's about the same distance, 0.3 to 0.5, something like that, I don't know, to get to the station, which has basically a full bar at it. So you have two options for getting to two great hostels, and I believe you can probably ask for long-term parking at both of them if you intend to hike this section and shuttle to the beginning. But definitely a beautiful, beautiful section that you could crush in a long weekend. Now this one's kind of just a trail superlative from me personally, the best hostel. So I actually would recommend starting this section at the hostel itself. It's Woods Hole Hostel in Virginia at mile marker 625.8. This hostel is absolutely beautiful. It's run by a lovely lady named Nebel. It's the oldest hostel on the trail, and it's just a great experience for staying someplace on the trail. And if you start at Woods Hole Hostel, I'd recommend going from there to Peters Mountain Trailhead at mile marker 657.3. This is a 31.5 mile section with just a 0.1 side trail to the Peters Mountain Trailhead parking area where you can either get picked up or potentially leave a vehicle. Like I said, always check the rules because I did not personally do that. You get to see, like I said, Woods Hole, the oldest hostel on trail. I definitely recommend staying the night there if you're starting out the next morning, or if you want to hike this southbound and stay there at the end. 10 out of 10 recommend to stay at this hostel. You also get to go through in this section the Paris Ledges and get to see the beautiful Angel's Rest viewpoint. If you're there during the summertime, you'll probably get to see a lot of flowers in bloom along the trail, and it's just really stunning. You also have the option to go into Parisburg if you'd like to do an extra road walk or a hitch. And if you go up to the rice fields shelter, whether you stay there or just hike through, it has an absolutely gorgeous view in front of the shelter that is so worth seeing. So it's a really pretty and kind of short section for you if you have a 2 to 3 day weekend and want to experience one of the trail's most iconic hostels. Okay, now probably the most classic section of the AT to hike is, you've got it, the Virginia Triple Crown. So this starts at Virginia 620 or Trout Creek Road, which is mile marker 697.0 in Virginia. And I would recommend ending in Daleville, Virginia at mile marker 730.6. This makes us a 33.6 mile section, point to point section. And I have heard of a lot of people doing this in one day or potentially two. But you could definitely split it up into 3, or if you have a really long weekend, you could split up into 4 and really enjoy your time on trail at these viewpoints. But in doing this section, you get to conquer the 3 most beautiful spots, arguably, in Virginia, and that's Dragon's Tooth, the iconic McAfee's Knob, which I guarantee you, if you have seen a picture of someone on the AT, you've seen them on McAfee's Knob at some point. Also, incidentally, if you have a Virginia Appalachian Trail Conservancy license plate, the outcropping on the license plate is actually McAfee's Knob. You also get to hit Tinker Cliffs, which is literally the trail runs right beside the edge of a series of cliffs where you get to look down into the valley. You get to look back towards McAfee's Knob, and it's just a really beautiful section of trail. It is going to be busier, especially around McAfee's Knob and Dragon's Tooth, and it is kind of challenging when you're descending from Dragon's Tooth down into the valley below, but you get absolutely beautiful views, and it's a very fun section of trail to hike. Okay, so for those of you who are really looking for a kick butt weekend, and by kick butt, I don't mean like super fun. I mean, you want a challenge. You want to feel like you worked out the whole weekend, then try the Virginia roller coaster section. Now, I would recommend starting at Blue Ridge Mountain Road, which is mile marker 992.5, but apparently the entrance is very tricky to find. I have not personally tried to find it, but I guess there's a deep dip and an immediate turn, and you probably want something that's not a sedan to go on this road. The reason I recommend starting here is because that's kind of the closest parking area that I could find to the start of the Virginia roller coaster. And I would recommend ending at the Blackburn AT Center, which is mile marker 1013.8. Now this is a 21.3 mile section, but don't discount it. This is a very, very hard section, especially if you do it in the summertime when you're adding heat and humidity onto the challenge of hiking the roller coaster. Now, you obviously get to do the iconic Virginia roller coaster, where pretty much your far out map just looks like this for a while. And you can also stop in and see Bear's Den Rocks, which is right on the trail in the middle of the roller coaster. Beautiful view. It will be filled with tourists, but if you want to, you can take a little side trail, like a little side quest to the Bear's Den Hostel or the Bear's Den Brewery, which we ended up going off trail with MC's family to enjoy some food at the brewery, and it was really beautiful and a pretty fun experience. You also get to see Raven Rocks, which has a lovely view, and you're hiking through 2 states, Virginia and West Virginia. You also get to end at the beautiful Blackburn AT Center, which has 2 blue blazes to reach the AT Center. Both of them are very much downhill, and I think they're 0.2 to 0.3 miles a piece, but the center is very nice. It has a caretaker, it has a shelter, has a priv, and family can drop you on and off. Family or friends can drop you on and off the trail, or you can catch a shuttle from somewhere. But that is a very difficult but pretty fun. You feel like you're a boss when you're done hiking that section. So if you're feeling froggy, go for it. Now, this section I would call the iconic halfway section. You start at Caledonia State Park, or in that vicinity, at mile marker 1085.9, and this is in Pennsylvania, and you end at Pine Grove Furnace State Park at mile marker 1105.8. This is a 19.9 mile section, so this is truly a just have a weekend going out for an overnight hike. You get to see the Quarry Gap shelters, which in my opinion was the nicest shelter on trail. That is the beautiful side-by-side shelters with the covered picnic area in the middle. It's got a fire pit, it's got gnomes, it's got tent platforms, water, games. Like, it's a beautiful shelter, and that's the one where you see those signs about the innkeeper at the shelter, because there's a guy named Jim that does an absolutely fantastic job with 2 other gentlemen in maintaining that shelter, but it's a beautiful spot to stop. You also get to see the actual mileage halfway point of the trail somewhere before as we basically just call it the halfway point of the trail, which is in Pine Grove Furnace State Park, which would be your ending point if you hike this section. Now, in Pine Grove Furnace State Park, there is the AT Museum, which has a lot of AT history and a lot of AT trail logs if you would like to do some very entertaining reading. And you also can stop in and get a pint of ice cream or a couple scoops, or try the iconic half-gallon challenge, eating half a gallon of ice cream in 30 minutes or less at Pine Grove Furnace Country Store. But this is a good way to experience a little more trail culture, and also just enjoy a beautiful set of shelters, as well as some, I remember it being reasonably easy hiking by AT standards, except for that climb out of Caledonia State Park to the Quarry Gap shelters. That was a beast, but otherwise, pretty great section of trail. So I couldn't come up for another name for this section other than nice views and small scrambles. So that's the most adequate description of it, but I definitely think it deserves a mention. It starts in Wawayanda State Park at mile marker 1366.0 in New Jersey and ends at US Route 9D at mile marker 1410.9 in New York. This is a little more ambitious for a long weekend, but it's 44.9 miles, although you could potentially stop short in Fort Montgomery and shave a couple of miles off. Now, in this section, you could potentially go to the Warwick Drive-In Theater from the Warwick Turnpike, which is a lot of fun. It's not free to camp there. It's $5 to camp there. It's $5 to rent a radio, $5 if you want to rent a chair, but it is an iconic AT experience. You also get to conquer 2 states during this. You get to go from New York to New Jersey, and you can hit Prospect Rock in New York, which is the highest point in New York. You get some lovely rock scrambles from the New York border, basically until you're done with this section. You can stop at the Belleville Farm Creamery, which I 10 out of 10 recommend. Delicious ice cream there. You get to hike over Cat Rocks, which is actually a really fun rock scramble. It's not at like New Hampshire, Maine level rock scramble, but it is a lot of fun and you get some really nice views. It is very sketchy in the rain, I can tell you that for a fact, but it's a pretty cool section. You also get to see Fitzgerald Falls, which is an absolutely gorgeous waterfall that the trail literally basically hikes through. You can participate in the Lemon Squeezer, which I'm sure you guys have all heard of, and it is a big narrow section of trail where the rocks just kind of do this number, and trust me, no matter how much weight you've lost hiking the trail, you will probably still get your backpack stuck in there because most of us have about the same size backpacks, but it's a lot of fun to do. You also get to go up and over Bear Mountain if it's open, which as of the comments and far out from 2024, hikers are still being asked to go around it, so just keep an eye on that or risk it for the biscuit like we did when we went through in 2023 right after the floods and go over Bear Mountain, because I honestly, like, even right after the flooding, it was not bad, but you do you. I have to encourage you for the purposes of this channel to keep it legal and take the detour, but you could potentially hike over Bear Mountain depending on when you do this section of trail. And you can end by hiking through the Trailside Zoo. Make sure you check the hours for that, or you'll have to take the sketchy little Blue Blaze bypass for it, in which case it doesn't really make it worth hiking past Fort Montgomery. So if you are going to be later in the day or going through finishing when the Trailside Zoo is not open, I would recommend cutting this section in Fort Montgomery, New York, instead of going through the Trailside Zoo. But it's a beautiful section, and you also get to cross the Bear Mountain Suspension Bridge on the pedestrian side and get beautiful views of the Hudson River. I think it's the Hudson River below, and then also back to Fort Montgomery and up towards Anthony's Nose. So it's a really pretty section in New York. The trail itself is just really beautiful, and it's kind of when you first start easing yourself into more of the New England style rock scrambles. So definitely recommend spend some time in New York. It's actually really cool. So of all 14 states that I hiked through on the Appalachian Trail, I'm not gonna lie, Maine was my absolute favorite. So this next section is just the best of Maine. So stuff in Maine that you can fit into a weekend or long weekend nutshell. But I love Maine, absolutely love Maine. So the first section I'm gonna tell you about is in southern Maine. It starts at US Route 2, which is mile marker 1898.9. This is just up the road from Gorham, New Hampshire. And it ends at Maine 26, which is Grafton Notch, which is mile marker 1930.0 in Maine. It is a 31.1 mile section, but do not underestimate its difficulty. Think White's level difficulty of climbing and time. So you get to hike in 2 states in this section. Obviously, you're starting in New Hampshire and you're ending in Maine. You go up and over Mount Success in New Hampshire, which is the final mountain you conquer before hitting the state line. This mountain is beautiful, and the forest at top is beautiful, covered in moss, and there's apparently a plane crash up there somewhere, but we didn't hike around to find it. There are, I think, instructions to find it though in Far Out if you're feeling adventurous. Now, once you get into Maine, you get a lot of these beautiful, like, open summit rock walks in Maine, and I remember going over the Goose Eye section where you can actually take a side trail up to the Goose Eye summit, and I could hear people talking on the summit, even though I was like a mile below on on the AT, and it was just a really weird sound conduction thing, and that was the only place on trail I ever remember something like that happening. So just a little cool fun fact if you're hiking through that area. And of course, you get to conquer the iconic Mahoosic Notch, which is either the most fun or the most difficult mile on the AT, depending on who you ask. I think it was a little bit of both, but it is a huge boulder field scramble. And guys, just plan a lot of time to get through this mile. If you normally hike like 2 miles an hour, I can tell you what, this is not going to take you 15 minutes. 15 or 30 minutes, you are going to have to take an hour plus going through Mahoosic Notch. So bear that in mind if you're weekend warrioring this section. Mahoosic Notch is followed by the equally difficult climb up Mahoosic Arm, and followed by Old Speck, which is an also incredibly difficult climb up and climb down the other side. But on the other side of Old Speck, going down into Grafton Notch, you get to see a series of really beautiful waterfalls, some nice views. Like I said, this section is very challenging, but you can find blueberry patches, great views, and it's just a really fun section that kind of encompasses the beauty of Southern Maine that really kind of gets almost overlooked when people are talking about the Northeast, because everyone's like, oh, the whites, but really guys, Southern Maine, it's amazing. Go hike it. Great weekend. Now, another awesome way to experience the trail in Maine over a weekend is hiking to the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. So you can start at Abel Bridge at mile marker 2182.3 and end at, obviously, Mount Katahdin, Mama K herself, mile marker 2197.4, with an additional 4.5 or so plus miles to descend the mountain afterwards. So this is a 15.1 mile plus section of trail. So it'll probably end up being around 20 to 25, depending on how you decide you want to descend Mount Katahdin afterwards. Now, you start out this section with the absolutely postcard view of Mount Katahdin from Abel Bridge. Like, it is tear-jerkingly beautiful, whether you have hiked there from Georgia or have pulled up in a car and are looking at the mountain. You can hike through a birch grove, and when you get into Baxter State Park, the trail is fairly level, and you go past a ton of really beautiful waterfalls. Like, I'm talking waterfalls galore. Little Niagara was probably my favorite to see on the way, but it's really like that section of trail between Abel Bridge and the base of Mount Katahdin is a very cruisy, easy section of trail to hike. And then of course you end with that beautiful, iconic hike up Mount Katahdin, which guys, this is an extremely difficult hike. So start early in the morning at the base of Katahdin, and definitely plan, if you have the ability to choose your dates, to choose your weekend you're doing this, definitely plan to go up Mount Katahdin when there's good weather, because you are hiking a long way above tree line, and you really want those great views from the summit, because if you get a clear day up there, guys, it is a 360 beautiful view. And also, please remember, if you are just hiking this as a section over the weekend or as a day hike, please remember that AT thru hikers who are coming up to that sign really want their moment there, because they've walked a lot further than you have to get there. So just remember to be respectful, share the sign, and celebrate with the thru hikers who are ending or starting their journey on Mount Katahdin. All right, so those are my favorite weekend warrior bite-sized sections of the Appalachian Trail. For those of you who have 2 to even 4 days to spare over a weekend and want to get out there and hike, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you're able to get out there on the trail and enjoy all that it has to offer. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and as always, guys, happy trails. Be safe out there.